Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Friday Business Intelligence Tip of the Week. Thank you for attending today, and I have to apologize for last week's session where I forgot to show my screen. So I'm going to be redoing that one sometime next week and posting it out there again. And that was around how do you incorporate stored procedures in Power BI. Today, we're going to be going through how to add custom columns and measures in Power BI. And so we'll be going through those as we continue our series. As always, if you have suggestions of future sessions, please feel free to send them to us, and we'll make sure and we get those in there for a future presentation. So that'll be info@dashboardgear.com is a great place to send those. So with that, why don't I jump on over and get started with our session today? So what I've done is shared my screen right away this time for Power BI Desktop. And so what I'm going to do, we went through already how to get data from various sources. So I'm going to start out with just getting data from a SQL Server database. We've went through SQL Server, CSV files, and other formats. And so I'm going to be covering SQL Server today. And the point of this is I'm going to just go to my laptop again. It's not so much the type of data that we're doing, but so I'm just going to grab two basic tables that are out here. And those of you that are Lawson or Infor users will recognize these tables as they're pretty common ones on the financial side. So as this is connecting into my SQL Server, I'm going to come out here and it's going to list various tables. The first table I'm going to pick is the AC activity, which is just a project table. So when you see the term activity, that's like a project number and a description. So it has that data in it. And then I'm going to pick another table for called GL names, which is like cost centers or departments, for those of you that aren't familiar with that. So we'll pick that one as well. Actually, instead of GL names, I'm going to pick GL system. Let's do that one. That's the company numbers. That's even easier for this. So we've got activity and AC activity and GL system. So we'll have projects and companies, for example, that we're going to do today. And I just want to make sure that they're in there, and I'm going to say load. And what that's going to do is it's going to jump out here, grab the tables, and import them into Power BI. So while that's doing that, now what we're going to be doing for this is most of the time, I would say you'd want to lean towards, if you have additional data that you want to add in that's not in your tables, to do that via SQL. Usually that gives you the best performance if you do it on the source system as you're bringing it in. However, there are times when you can't do that. Or there's certain types of calculations that make sense to do in Power BI itself when they're more relative to the other data you're doing, whether it's year-to-date balances or averages, things like that typically don't lend themselves too well to individual rows of data in the source system. So it's usually best to do those in Power BI. So what I'm going to do is we have our various tables out here, and when you want to and I'm just going to make sure that everything is looking good here. So I'm going to look at the data, make sure that it joined. So it did join fine. And let's make sure that it joined by my company number for the tables, because it's basically a company numbers associated across, and it did. So it understood what I was doing, which is always a good thing. So I'm going to go back to Power BI here. And in here, if I look at my activities, when you want to modify one of these table structures, the three little ellipses to the right is the way I usually do it. Now, all things in Power BI, there's many ways to do it, but this is the way I usually do it. You're going to see when you click on the ellipsis, new measure and new column and new quick measure. Now, what's the difference between a measure and a column? So if you're talking about data that you're not going to aggregate or calculate on, that would be a column. If it's something that you want to do as a calculation, that's a measure. So for the first example I'm going to give you is we're going to do a new column of data. And when I say new column, it's going to go out there and bring up a editor for me of that column. And what it's going to do at the top is list the column, and then it's a blank kind of text box here. And the language that Power BI uses to create these columns is called DAX, D-A-X. And so if you want to refer to that or look that up on more of the details, you can do that. But what you use for DAX, and I'm just going to do something like activity, let's say full name. And that's usually what I do. A lot of times in the database, there'll be items that maybe two columns I want to concatenate together. So I would have like the activity column. So I'll do activity. And when you want to do a column in DAX, you have to put brackets around it. So I'm just going to say activity. And then I'm going to append a dash between them and append another column. I'll do the description of the activity. So maybe I want a column in my database that has the project or the activity concatenated with an ampersand and then the description. And so if I go ahead and I hit enter on that. Now, to just show this data, that's going to add that into the item. And this, where I replaced the word column, it gave it a name, activity full name. That's what I'm going to see in my data set here as activity full name. So what I'm going to do, and you'll notice it has a little different symbol in front of it to represent that it's a calculated column that we're working with. So if I add a report or a table to this view, go ahead and do that. Now when I bring activity full name into the view, you're going to see a listing of all my activities, a dash, and the descriptions together. If I wouldn't have done that, and I bring in activity by itself in here, maybe I'll put that up here, and I'll bring in description by itself. Oops, put it in the wrong spot. Let's already get rid of that there. And now we'll add activity. We'll put this in the front of these things. So now you can see there's activity and description. It's giving me the same data, but it concatenates them together in one spot. Now, oftentimes, you want to do something a little more, and it's something that was a little bit confusing, where I want to take data from two different tables and bring together. And that's the reason I brought in two tables in this example. You'll notice on AC activity, there is a column in here for company. I go down here at company, but the name of the company is not there. So like if I drop company up here, there isn't a way to get the actual company name because it doesn't exist in the activity table, but it does exist in that GL system table. So I'm going to go ahead just for an example and add another column into the mix. And we'll do it much the same way. So it gives me that. And in this case, I'm going to call it company name. And in this case, what I'm going to do is, because I am adding this company name into the activity table, I can't just refer to a column in there. So there's a key word that's in here called related. And in this case, I can then just say GL system and do a bracket and then do name. So what I'm doing is I'm telling it from a related table, GL system, and I preface it with the word system, our GL system on front, and then the name of the table that I'm dealing with. So if I go ahead and I hit enter on this, what that's going to do is recalculate my table again and reload that in. And then down here, on the right-hand side, you'll notice it added company name. So if I go ahead and I bring that in, it now has the company name as part of the activity. Now I could get at it by going to GL system, but oftentimes you want to bring data from two tables together. For convenience sake, but also some of the actions that you'll do within Power BI are only limited to within that data object you're dealing with. So there's reasons to have to do that. So if you do need to reference over to the other table with the keyword related, you can do that. Now I'm going to show you one other type of column here, and that's a measure. So if I want to add a calculation into this, I will do that as a measure. So let me just find an amount in here. Here's an amount, balance and amount. If I go ahead and add balance amount into this. So for each project, there's a specific balance related to that. And it's just an arbitrary number, and the number is not that important at this point. But if I come over here to the activity, I can add a new measure. And what this will do is the same kind of editor pops up, but I'm going to give it a measure name instead. And so this measure name, I'm going to give it a name of maybe forecast. I don't know, this doesn't, I'm going to call it pessimist, will really be. What that's going to be is what I like to do is I like to say sum. So I'm going to aggregate the balance amount. So I'm going to sum up the balance amount. Whoops. It's not going to like that because I hit enter. So it's trying to add my partial calculation in the mix, which it took. So it's just the same thing as my balance amount, but instead for my calculation, I'm going to say times 0.9. I'm going to say my balance is going to be 90% of that. So now if I come over here, once it finishes adding, I will see a new field called pessimist, and it will treat that as a calculated measure that I can add in, which, as you can see, is 90% of the balance within it. So these calculations could be either fields that you're bringing together. They can be full-blown calcs. There are tons of functions you can add into this. And what I found is a good way to kind of learn that is under Microsoft, they do have a reference for DAX. So if you search on data analysis expressions reference or DAX reference, you'll get an overview and all kinds of functions out here. They have relationships and dates and times, calculations, other things you can do. So very powerful language, takes a little bit of playing around to get used to it. So what I'm going to be doing as we're going through many of the sessions going forward, you're going to see a lot more DAX come out as we start to do some more advanced things with these columns. But hopefully you see today that if there's something not in your data, it's very simple to go ahead and add a new column in, whether you're concatenating or trimming or taking a substring of something or doing a calculation on an amount. Just by using DAX formulas, you can insert that into the data. So hopefully you found today's session useful, and we'll talk with you again next week, along with my redo of the SQL stored procedure import. So have a great week, and we'll talk to you again next week.